Thanks for joining us to talk about Best of Breed DevOps, how modern teams build their tool chains. I'm Megan Schumann, Program Manager for Atlassian's Partnerships team, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. We've got a good variety of perspectives here from people deeply involved in DevOps at Atlassian, Datadog, Slack, and Sumo Logic. The discussion is a unique opportunity to hear from individuals whose experience ranges from the software to the IT sides of DevOps, from the internal teams that build DevOps tooling to those engaging with DevOps-focused customers. Every company participating in this discussion today does both. We'll be covering three aspects of DevOps: automation, metrics and insights, and contextual integrations. Our objective is to give you ideas that you can try out with your teams. Now let's have each panelist introduce himself. Panelists, please tell us your name and your role with your organization, and then share an aspect of DevOps where your team excels today, as well as one that you're striving to develop, which could be one and the same. Let's start with you, Peter.
How's it going? Thanks, Megan. My name is Peter. I am the System Development Manager at Slack. My team focuses on quality and how we provide testing from when a customer reports a bug throughout its dev lifecycle into releasing the new features or new fixes onto production. And I'll hand it over to Sam, who joins us from Datadog.
Thanks, Peter. So I'm Sam. I'm a site reliability engineer at Datadog. One of our biggest focuses is chaos engineering. This is because we continue to improve resilience and prepare for all the different kinds of infrastructure level failures that could happen. So it's a really important aspect of an SRE's job. I'll next pass it on to Zach from Atlassian.
Great. Thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone. My name is Zach. I'm the head of engineering for tech teams, which includes our software and our IT-focused products at Atlassian. Over the last couple of years, we've really started to embrace the concept of DevOps and integrated that deeply into all of our teams. And one of the things that we really appreciate is the visibility that we need across all of our DevOps tool chains, and how we have recognized how important that is for not just our internal customers, but also teams that are utilizing Atlassian products. The biggest operational change that we are seeing is how many people are making changes to the same node. That includes feature flags, changes to code, changes to the OS, and sometimes it's really difficult to understand what change broke our product. So, that's really something that we are focused on, is creating that visibility across all of our tools to reduce mean time to resolution and understand where that change came from. So that's a little bit about me. I'll pass it over to our final panelist, which is Drew from Sumo Logic.
Yeah, hey everyone, thanks for having me. So I'm Drew, I'm the Director of Business Development at Sumo Logic for our App Intelligence Partner Program, which is just another way of saying that I'm helping our customers build and deploy integrations with Sumo Logic that help their customers derive helpful insights and metrics. Something that's important for us here at Sumo right now, a big focus on measuring software delivery performance. It's a big area for us, both internally and given what we do, right, with our customers. As our internal teams and customers are moving more and more towards continuous everything, we're finding that it's becoming increasingly important to get real-time feedback on software development and delivery performance. Back to you, Megan.
Thanks, Drew. What each of you shared speaks to some of the big aspirations that a lot of teams have around DevOps. You talked about improving speed and efficiency without compromising quality, tightening responsiveness when issues arise, which starts with better visibility for everyone involved, which I heard a couple of you say. And then also getting in rhythms as a team that allow us to adapt as conditions require, which we're all getting a crash course in right now as the pandemic disrupts routine ways of working. Now, let's talk about what it takes to actually move towards these aspirations. There, as I mentioned, are three areas that we're going to discuss today: automations, metrics and insights, and contextual integrations. Each of these are often looked to with optimism as part of the solution, as well as frustration when it feels like in reality they're not really delivering on expectation. I'm interested to hear how each of you as panelists are finding opportunity in each of these three areas. First, we're going to start with automation. Teams are looking to automate their pipelines across workflows, from the continuous integration, delivery, deployment practices that were just mentioned that create software, to how incidents are managed. Automation can relieve a lot of pain compared to manual tasks, but getting automation to work well in an unpredictable environment is challenging. I can't think of a buzzword that better captures that unpredictability than chaos engineering, which Sam, you were talking about. So how has your team, Sam, taken a more automation-driven approach to chaos engineering? And how has that adoption spread to other parts of Datadog?
Sure. So we've moved from informal, manually orchestrated game days to more automated ones, where a game day is essentially just a gathering of people to apply some infrastructure level failure. I mean that taking down some pods or some node servers or messing with the network, and seeing how resilient these services are. In terms of spread to other teams, early adopters play an important role. They are the people who help us by using our automation continuously in their environments, which gives us a lot of data, which we can use to help create more failures and new automations for other teams. So we need to find those early supporters and definitely help them to improve the product.
That's great. Yeah, early adopters are super important. Peter, how does automation change how your teams are collaborating at Slack?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. I want to echo Sam's point. There are different manual testing rely on external factors as well. That can produce human errors and can sometimes be misleading to the test cases that they produce, where it causes some flakiness in the test results. So with automation, you get a consistent metrics of how it performs on a feature basis. So when a bug is introduced, you have automations that will repeatedly spin up in different types of environments and also different scenarios. Not to say that all automations are great because it's as good as the developers that create all these test cases. So there are balances between these two elements, and we take that very seriously when it comes to testing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Zach, when a team at Atlassian adopts an automation like the type that Peter was just describing for testing, I'm sure there are organic ways that they spread, like we were hearing about with early adopters. Are there other ways that leaders can also help cause more spread and adoption of automation?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, that's one of the ways that we encourage our leaders to use their visibility across teams. So, at Atlassian, we have adopted tech ops reviews or technical operations reviews where teams review their dashboards, their incident reports, their post-incident, retrospectives, and there's a lot of learnings that come out of those. One of the really good automations we've discovered is, when we do discover those automation opportunities, saying that, hey, another team should just consider this doesn't really work. What we have realized is you really have to provide incentives and track adoption and understand that the adoption is actually resulting in good outcomes as well. So another learning that I wanted to share, especially when it comes to sharing the opportunities that come from automation, is throwing out new policies into effect can be really disconcerting for a lot of teams. Teams really need to understand the why behind the new tool or the new automation, and it really helps to find the why, and that really helps move teams forward. And in addition to that, what we have learned is tooling and best practices really help. So just throwing out policies aren't great. It's following up with tooling and practices that teams can also adopt to comply with those policies help a lot.
Thanks, Zach. As an Atlassian, I agree. Having the rationale behind a new change is expected and appreciated. No one wants to be kind of thrown into surprise about stuff like that. Now let's talk about metrics and insights. This is how we observe what's working and then figure out why something is not working. Drew, what different types of metrics can help teams improve performance with DevOps?
Sure, yeah. So what I wanted to talk about today was a little bit more around metrics in the software development lifecycle around software delivery performance. I know that Sam and others have plenty to say around operational metrics, including things like incident management. But on the software delivery performance side in general, what I would recommend, I think a good place to start is with the DORA metrics. What I like about those is they're backed by years of data science. They're intuitive. They're really portable metrics, meaning that any team can evaluate themselves and benchmark themselves against these metrics, regardless of the technology that they use, the team that are on, the market that they play in, and see how they kind of stand up to other teams, right? And then again, through some of the DORA research that they've done, Dr. Nicole Forsgren and team have kind of found that these metrics are closely tied to customer satisfaction, productivity, and organizational profit. So let me go through those real quick. So they're kind of broken up into two sections on throughput and to play against that, a nice balance on the reliability side. So on throughput, you've got deployment frequency, which is basically how often are you deploying into production, and lead time, which is how long does it take to go from commit all the way to production. And then on the reliability side, you have mean time to resolution. So when there's an incident that occurs in production, how long does it take for the team to resolve that and get services back up and running? And then change failure rate, which is what percentage of changes going into production are causing failures. And then in practice, what I try to think about with these metrics, right, and using them, I try to think about the business outcomes that they can provide, and really like the inputs that software development teams can affect to kind of drive those outcomes. So an example at Sumo, we're really focused on customer satisfaction and agility and delivering innovative features and products. Who isn't, right? And so one of the inputs that our teams are focused on right now is lead time. So we've had a pretty maniacal focus on trying to reduce our lead time and measuring that lead time. Again, as an example, like one of the bottlenecks that we found, this year is around test time and deploying, time and deploying to our test environments and running automated tests. So, spinning up EC2 instances in AWS and getting, our environment running up in Kubernetes was taking us a lot of time. And so one of the practices that we put in place was we built a shared Kubernetes cluster for all of our teams to use and deployed our automated tests and deployed our application through like ephemeral Kubernetes containers to kind of reduce startup time, deploy time, so that we could get our automated tests running faster and get results back more quickly. That's just one example. It's a continuous process for us, which really just brings me back to my last point, where what we've just found is, continuously being able to monitor these metrics and give us feedback in real time is helping us iterate and innovate faster.
That's great. It's really helpful to understand the evidence-tested industry standard metrics and how within your team you guys are doing that around the lead time metrics. Thanks. Now we're going to start trying to talk about insights related to issues. So Sam, you were mentioned. Let's talk about the incident management side. How do the metrics that your team focuses on during an incident shift?
Yeah, so Drew had a really good point about needing more detailed data to diagnose specific issues. After an outage, we need to quickly determine what may be happening on our side versus, say, the cloud provider side. One way of doing this is to add geographic data to nodes. So let's say if several nodes in a specific geographic area go down, this may be a good indication that an issue is on the cloud provider side rather than our side.
Wonderful. Yeah. And now let's shift to considering the information that customers want to see. Zach, in what ways are you seeing customers use these types of DevOps insights to improve their release management?
Yeah, you know, as we were mentioning earlier, the number of reasons why a service can break is insurmountable now. You know, you have you can have changes from feature flags, you can have changes from code, and you can now have and you know, an infrastructure team can come in and make a change to the kernel version, and that can break your software. So you know, there's a real interest in from customers, both inside of Atlassian and outside of Atlassian, to see a dashboard that gives engineers the ability to spot changes that create problems, so they can dive in really quickly. You know, it comes back to having that end-to-end visibility with the ability to double click for more details when something looks fishy. And that's really something that I know a lot of our teams are working towards, is to create that master dashboard that can help engineers identify problems as quickly as possible.
That's a great segue, Zach, actually, into our last of the 3 DevOps topics for today, contextual integrations. Having the type of visibility that you're talking about relies on data from many tools that teams use, everything from Git repositories and code commits to feature flags, to incident management. Integrations between products are a way to bring together insights, but they don't always deliver. Drew, what value do contextual integrations deliver today to teams, and where do you see room for improvement?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, from my perspective, you know, it's essentially, you know, critical to derive metrics and insights across multiple contextual integrations, right? Those are, you know, measuring those are what's going to allow you to you know, understand what the business outcome is in measuring those. And really, without continuous feedback on all of these different integrations, right, it's tough to be agile, whether it's adapting to technology adoption, dealing with changing customer preferences, emerging security threats, or, you know, keeping up with compliance and regulatory. So what I kind of see is a problem really around fragmentation. So the move kind of like to cloud native has been helpful in getting teams moving faster, deploying code faster. You know, but it's come at a bit of a price, just due to the plethora of tools and technologies that have kind of come along with that movement, right? So a good example, I think, is just going to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation website and taking a look at the large set of tools and technologies that are currently in incubation, right? It's like it's an assembly line of tools and technologies that you can integrate into your build, test, deploy, release, operate pipeline, right? And, you know, that's definitely not a bad thing. You know, these tools are super helpful. They're emitting logs. They're even, you know, providing insights for you and for your teams to give you specific context. But there's really no great way to kind of easily build together insights that can kind of span across multiple integrations, whether it's 2, 3, or a dozen integrations, right? And so maybe just like an example of that, going back to some of the metrics I was talking about earlier, mean time to resolution, right? So thinking through that flow, you know, you could just kind of take a look at maybe PagerDuty, or whether it's OpsGenie, and understand how long a ticket is open. Okay, it's open, and then we resolve the issue and it's closed. So that's my mean time to resolution. But what would be really nice, like the problem that we're trying to work through, is it would be great to have visibility across that entire flow. So, you know, from a production monitoring issue that you're seeing in Kubernetes, you know, filing a ticket via OpsGenie or PagerDuty, you know, creating a bug as a developer after root cause analysis that goes to Jira, you know, committing code to fix that to Bitbucket, building on Jenkins, you know, deploying it with a suite of, you know, tools and technologies, right? That's a handful of integrations, right? And it's difficult to, if you want to, get visibility into the time it's taking to kind of get through all of these different phases. You know, as a DevOps engineer, it gives me a digital migraine, right? So that's really kind of the focus on what we're trying to do here at Sumo is kind of extending past, you know, operations and provide some insight into the software development lifecycle to allow teams to kind of, and I think this is something that everyone wants, right? To just give you a dashboard with some metrics that you can set up to correlate data across those different contextual integrations and get that up and running quickly, right? So that you can focus on getting that continuous feedback and improving.
That seems like such a widespread need, and there are so many across industries, just companies and teams that need that right now. So that's great. Sometimes there is a need for custom integrations, which I know can present challenges to include in a dashboard, but also bring other benefits. Peter, I know at Slack, you guys have done a lot with custom integrations. How are you guys using custom integrations, and how do you decide when to do that versus an off-the-shelf option?
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes custom integration can be very beneficial. It really gives you the customizations that you want to achieve in your dev lifecycle. Given that you have the build to release that in some cases are different use cases. So having a custom build solution really provide that gap that some solutions off the shelf does not offer. To say that point, there's also a cost benefit that you have to consider when you build a solution. You have to staff the right support. You have to make sure that it's well documented. You have to make sure that you have a team backing up that custom solution. Versus some of our buy methods where we have sort of off-the-shelf types of need for integrations. We tend to focus on how to leverage those support areas where we don't have enough resource or it's not a priority in our organization. And that's where we can leverage in prioritizing what's important versus what is essential to the business to have quality code going to production. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that we can continue to evolve in how we do integrations, whether it's off the shelf or customized. And I think a common pain point that we've been talking about on this topic of integrations is just the need to have a centralized way of pulling in data from a lot of tools and making sure that the humans on the receiving end feel more supported by it, not more overwhelmed by all the noise that suddenly is coming at them. So hopefully as we get into some of the tips and tricks, if you guys have any ideas on how to handle all of that, that'll be really helpful. So that actually gets us to our last section, which is the tips and tricks. Let's hear from each of you something that you'd recommend for those that are watching, wanting to up-level how they do DevOps on their teams. What's something you can recommend that they can just start trying out now back on their teams? And Peter, how about you get us started?
Okay, off the records, I'm going to talk a little bit about Slack and how to reduce some of the noise of notification that we've been hearing a lot in the community. There's obvious some preference features do not disturb to allow you to not get those notifications during off hours. Those are some obvious ones. We Slack has a very structured way of communicating as well. We strive on having a lot of bots to have a lot of those notifications. So it's centralized sort of a an organized way to receive these notifications and not directly DMing or direct messaging to you. So that can eliminate some of the noise. Also, there's upcoming features that hasn't been rolled out yet, I don't know, to help organize ways to do channeling and messaging. So hopefully we'll have that soon as well. Some other areas to focus as well is there's different way of how we collaborate in this kind of communication where we can set announcements on channels and have those declaring messages respond via bots instead of just human touch. So I'll hand it over to Sam.
Thanks, Peter. So some tips that I would give in regards to, having a successful game day is make sure you're noting down lots of important information. So this information can be, what is your goal going into the game day? What do you want to test out and be specific about it? What are some of the actual versus expected outcomes of running specific commands on your infrastructure? Usually the expected and the actual do not correlate, but you want to get to that point where they're equal. And perhaps one of the easiest levels of this kind of automation of chaos engineering is, say, taking down a node or a server, or if you're using Kubernetes, taking down a pod. Usually services are very redundant. So if you take down one of these items, the service itself should be relatively healthy and should not be causing anyone any kinds of issues. And some tools that I would recommend, things like the Chaos Toolkit, which is currently open source, and some load testing software, which I believe it's called Locust, which is also open source and really awesome to use. Next, let's hear from Zach.
Thanks, Sam. The things we talked about today are really important. For senior leaders who are embracing or pushing out modern practices into their teams, the most important thing to remember is building the right culture and having the right mindset. I'm reminded of the quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And, if your teams are just not ready or simply don't see the value in the practices and the methodologies that we discussed, policies, tooling, and mandates certainly won't help. In my experience, I've found that starting small with a few teams, fine-tuning your tools and your practices as an example, and using those teams as an example to roll out broader changes is really a fail-safe way of moving forward. So, I guess to summarize, start small, create great examples, and move forward from there. That would be my takeaway. With that, over to you, Drew.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I like that. Just maybe to add that to that a little bit, you kind of talked about starting small and kind of expanding from there. I heard an interesting podcast last month from the director of Autodesk Build Platform, and he kind of talked about it also from the notion of, while you're working on building out your DevOps culture in-house and expanding that, what can also be helpful is kind of tackling it from the other side as well. So, while you're starting small, picking some tools, some technologies, and getting those up and running to kind of tackle it from both sides, and giving teams that are working through that culture change and adopting that culture some guardrails, right, around the adoption process. And so he kind of talked a little bit about how that acted as kind of a feedback loop to help drive the culture adoption, and vice versa to kind of get a critical mass going. So I guess, to that end, I'd say it can be helpful to think, about how tools and technologies can drive your culture change, and then how your culture change can then also help drive tools and technologies and how they kind of play off of each other. So, yep, back to you, Megan.
That's great. I like how you put a bow on it, Drew. I mean, we were talking about some of the tactics and specific tools and open source tools that are available, as well as culture shift and how do you get there, since so much of doing DevOps is really about that culture shift. So Wonderful recommendations. And thank you all for sharing your perspectives today on the role of automation, metrics insights, and contextual integrations. And I liked how they just kind of naturally all connected to each other. Yeah, so you've identified a lot of opportunities that teams can take advantage of today, as well as nodding to the future and things that we should continue to keep our eyes on, where there's a lot of evolution right now in the DevOps space. Thank you all who are tuned in right now, and hope you enjoy the rest of the remote summit discussions.